For the next few segments, our legal panel is going to join us to take a look at a bunch of stories that are not only just in the news here, but also really impactful. And let's start by introducing the panel. James Kousouros, he's a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, sitting on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association. He frequently lectures at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and Manhattan. Doug von Oiste, a founding partner of Carson von Oiste, focusing on corporate misconduct, and he was selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. And Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC and a former chief of the bias crimes unit at the Westchester County DA's office. All right, guys, let's start here with the opioid epidemic and the hundreds of lawsuits, literally, that are going after the drug manufacturers and distributors. Let's begin here with a shocking number. 76 billion, and that is with a B, 76 billion pills were distributed between just the years 2006 and 2012, resulting in nearly 100,000 opioid-related deaths during just that period. Some places harder hit than others, but in general, rural areas have the most pills per capita in their communities. Norton, Virginia, I want you to process this, has more than 300 pills per year per person. That includes from infant to the elderly and everyone in between. Several other places have numbers not much better. You can see from the numbers on your screen that we just showed you. Last week, I spoke with one of the lead attorneys representing hundreds of cities and counties that are suing the pharmaceutical industry, and he described what they're up against.
If you look at the way they marketed these pills, where they market any prescriptions, they don't market just for fun. They know that targeted marketing works, and they're able to track where every pill goes. They're able to track which physicians prescribed it, which pharmacies dispensed it, which patients received it, and they're able to tailor their marketing programs to boost profits. In my hometown, Huntington, West Virginia, we have 100,000 people in the county. We had 10 million pills every year for a decade. I want the country to understand this happened in your backyard, and this is affecting your community, and I want this to be an awakening.
Big Pharma could turn out to be its own worst enemy. That is, internal emails are starting to see the light of day, and they do not paint a pretty picture. In 2008, the largest maker of opioid pain pills and distributor in Ohio exchanged emails. I'm going to read a portion of the exchange. "Keep them coming. Flying out of there. It's like people are addicted to these things or something. Oh, wait, people are." The manufacturer responded, "Just like Doritos, keep eating. We'll make more." Then there's the Sackler family, owner of Purdue Pharma, which is the maker of OxyContin. Now, former company president Richard Sackler sent these emails to executives that, according to the Daily Beast and other major publications. And again, I quote directly, "We have to hammer on abusers in every way possible. They are the culprits in the problem. They are the reckless criminals." Another one said, "I'd hope for better results. What else more can we do to energize the sales and grow at a faster rate?" There are literally thousands of active cases, so there are too many details to go into, but this case in Ohio, a good example of what is going on. 2 counties suing Big Pharma, claiming the companies failed to control the number of pills that were being distributed or to analyze suspicious orders. The suit also claims the sales force, they were motivated to sell, even though the product is not only potentially dangerous, knowingly dangerous, even fatal. For the most part, the drug companies, they're fighting back saying, not our fault. All right, guys, a lot to process here, but in addition to those emails that were a smoking gun, there's a database. The database was designed for the manufacturers, Big Pharma, who's producing this, and the distributors. So in some end in point, Jimmy, they knew. They knew the volume of pills that they were producing. They knew the communities where the pills were going. They knew the rates of consumption that were going up. They even knew with the data what started off as opioid addictions, what turned into heroin addictions, what turned into fentanyl. They knew the fatalities. Anyone who had access to this report, and by the way, the DOJ and DEA did as well, even though maybe they couldn't connect the dots as well as Big Pharma certainly could have, You couldn't look at this database and not know the consequences of your product, and they already knew the addictive nature of the product. To me, this is more than unseemly and irresponsible. This is criminal.
You know, I have to say I've been involved in many of these cases. Our system has so many stopgaps. There are so many gatekeepers that could have prevented this, and our system has failed in its entirety. The doctors who prescribe, the pharmacists who dole it out, and then of course the pharmaceutical companies who do nothing more but try to sell more and more and more and more of the product. If you just think about it, it's such a complete failure, and then a failure of law enforcement and the regulatory agencies who have access to this.
You know what
It's
insane.
insane.
And we're putting up just numbers of just areas in our viewing area in terms of just how many pills per person. And again, when I say per person, I'm talking they count everyone from the infant to your elderly grandmother and everyone in between. So when you read this, think about really the consumers here, which are a smaller universe, and the volume of pills they'd be taking. But to me, this has all the whiff of 2008. Remember? Where people with subprime mortgage crisis, where people knew they couldn't make the payments, but they kept feeding it out. And then afterwards, what happened? Well, people shouldn't have borrowed it if they couldn't do it. It's the same argument. Oh, the addicts should have stopped here. They shouldn't keep taking the pill that they knew there was abuse. There was economic ruin there, and now the consequences are multiple because you're talking about deaths, addiction, destruction of families, and everything.
It's worse than 2008. At
Much
least
worse.
in 2008, you had all of these banks, hiding it and whatever, and then the ratings agencies just saying the credit was good. These are simple, clear statistics. You know how many pills are being distributed. You don't look at the doctors, you don't look at the pharmacies, you don't look at you just keep letting it happening until somebody says something.
This is actually a bipartisan affair. You have governors of red states, governors of blue states. You have victims, obviously, across all party lines, rural, suburban, urban, that have been impacted by this. I want to play a soundbite. This from Governor DeWine from Ohio. And listen to what he said about the devastating impact that this has had on his state and where he points the finger.
They flooded the state of Ohio with these opioid pills that they knew would kill people.
They knew would kill people.
If they didn't know it the first couple of years, they clearly would have seen it after that. You can't miss it. When one year we had close to a billion pain meds prescribed in the state of Ohio, 69 per man, woman, and child in the state, and that lies at the feet of the drug companies.
Now, Doug, you have dealt with major suits. Again, there was asbestos is your area where you know very well, where there was irresponsibility of manufacturers, people who used it, and obviously the deadly consequences. This, to me, far more even insidious, because you can argue at the time there was a thought versus what we know now. People knew this. A database was provided. No one can claim ignorance. But you have states, you have private suits, you have class action suits. Logistically, how does this work? Because we even got the headline today that the Sackler money is trying to move money around so that if they go after the company, there'll be nothing left. How do all these, not competing suits, but simultaneous ones, can they be coordinated since they have a common enemy and a common goal?
Well, first off, you have to look at it in the civil system and the criminal system. You mentioned it before. This should probably be dealt with criminally at this point. There's knowledge there. There's people that are actually, it's a controlled substance. You're allowed to sell it, but it's supposed to be controlled. And if it's not done that way, it's just drug dealers selling drugs. That's what it is. The separate thing is the civil system, where people are trying to get money for lost, for wrongful death, for people that are addicted, for counties that are burdened with these having to deal with the drugs. So in that case, you can have what's known as multi-district litigation, where you have one judge in one place appointed who basically takes over the litigation for an area.
But wouldn't the feds have to self-coordinate that, or would it be up to the states that they could basically come up with their own ideas in terms of, because I know, for example, the pocket of Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, and Ohio in the central portion is, at least on a concentration basis, the most impacted area in this country.
Well, it depends upon whether the cases are filed in federal court, and then there would be a federal coordination, or if they're filed in state court, and then there would be state coordination. Sometimes there can be overlap. So that will be dealt with. There's also a separate thing you're talking about with funds, where these companies, at some point when they realize that they're going to have to pay out a lot of money for the things they've done, they start to play games with the corporation, and they start to play games with the way the corporation is set up. They spin off liabilities, they try to go into bankruptcy. That's another game that's
Reportedly,
played.
that was what's going on in Sackler. Finally, Doug, when this is going on, is there a conscious effort to be the first to the courtroom door here? Because, you know, I mentioned literally thousands of lawsuits. There's only a certain amount of money that's left at the end of the day here. Is there a race, or is there an effort for coordination? Do they figure out how the monies would be allocated? I mean, talk about the smoking guns that are attached here. One of these pharma firms was talking about they wanted to get it from nose to tail. The same people producing the drugs that they knew would have an addictive nature, they also want to get in the rehab business to treat the patients that they knew they were getting addicted to the product.
Oftentimes the plaintiff's bar, the people suing, will get together and they'll work on it together. At the end of the case, when if money is going to be distributed, they figure out who did the most work and in what way, and that's something completely separate. But
so Mayo, I get to the punishment, okay? In 2008, unless you guys know, nobody went to jail, okay? Even though there was recklessness, there was knowingly exposing people that didn't have the wherewithal, and it was all for the almighty buck, okay? And at the end of the day, yeah, maybe some people had to pay some fines, maybe a few people had to shut their doors. I'm talking not the individuals harmed, but on the corporate. Here, to me, Doug said it. There was criminality involved. There is thousands of losses of life. Now, even if there were people that were rightfully medicated, that were prescribed this medicine, and then they abused it on their own, they knew what was going on, and they attempted to flood the market with more. To me, that's criminal. Am I overstating their exposure or no?
No, not at all. And I would think that there are states where if you hand a narcotic to someone and that person dies and you don't prescribe it legally, you can be held responsible for that person's death. I think that that should certainly be something that's looked at here. I also think that when you look at the Equifax case, where people are going to get $125 a piece because their information was compromised, how do you make a person whole who's lost a loved one because that person died because of something they maybe shouldn't have ever been prescribed, or a doctor overprescribed because they get a trip to the Bahamas? And again, we got to go back to regulations, because at some point everybody's against regulations. Well, this is regulations where it's not being implemented or where the regulation doesn't exist.
And by the way, this did not start under the Trump administration, so I'm not going there in any way, shape, or form. But the idea that this Department of Justice, with this leadership, is going to lead the charge against Big Pharma with the influence they have on the Hill. Listen, the DEA, where were they during all of this?
And the suggestion that any of these entities, the doctors, the pharmaceutical companies, the people who dispense the medication, are going to police themselves is absurd.
And we should have known that from the beginning, but I advise you to get more into this story, because it's worse than I even make it, if that's possible. All right, coming up next, more and more police officers in New York and other cities, they're getting doused with water while out patrolling, and there's a big debate about how they're responding and how they should respond. We'll discuss and debate after this.